that's actually kind of what I was just back. I just want to see if there was a Q&A. Okay. The audience were just to give presentations when I speak the mic setup. Set up just in case. All right. Thank you.
So annoying. I was like, I gave one of them a flat tire. But I need to go up to silver.
Just bring everybody in front.
That's fine. Yeah, you guys are good. You guys are good.
Thank you very much.
You guys want to come up?
You want to start this one on time because I'm going to run the last one.
Come on, what, 2 minutes?
Oh.
Are they lined up outside? Yeah, we're. They like the aisle seats, yeah.
That's
Yeah. I think this doing the wings and then filling in the center afterwards is working out pretty well.
tell me, especially sitting in front for Hobbits. This room is actually a really good size.
Yeah.
I miss it so much. I'm proud of it. That's really people say.
I was waiting for that to be officially canceled because they haven't officially canceled Portugal.
Oh, really?
It hasn't been officially canceled. It's been delayed. They do.
That's it.
We have lots of seating up here on this side if anybody wants to move up closer.
I've got a perfect spot.
Now y'all like your aisle seat? That's cool. And the lineup's done? Or are they just filtering people in?
People are just filtering.
Okay.
I don't think there was too
I don't need this anymore. Move up the mics. Oh, move the mics back. Same place. Don't block the sight lines. If there's a line.
The only thing sidelines with the mics there was me. I like not a lot, but
And everybody's just full for yeah, actually that was kind of awesome. They weren't expecting it.
Yeah, we will need another chair. Need another chair up on the stage. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are what, halfway through the last day of Calgary Expo? Yeah, I know. Well, no, unless you're wearing this color shirt, that's yay. We have truly enjoyed serving you and helping you experience this weekend. We couldn't do it without these guys in the red shirts that you see around. Give me a hand. Let's give them a hand. We're going to get this panel started right away. I'm looking forward to enjoying the afternoon. Check everything out that's going on. There's a lot happening today.
Holy smoke, this is a large crowd. Wow. Welcome to day 3, everybody. I'm sure this would be redundant, but you're all having a good time, I'm assuming. Yeah. Nobody was dragged here kicking and screaming, didn't have to do any special favors. Okay, that's good. Welcome to the fantastic panel that we're about to get started with the good folks from Weta. Yes, okay. My name is Dr. Aaron Taylor. I am the acting chair of the Department of New Media at the University of Lethbridge.
Hi, and I'm also James Graham, and I teach visual special effects at Department of New Media.
Absolutely, and we're here to co-moderate this panel this afternoon. I invite everybody here to drop by halls D&E, table Y10, where we've got a fantastic table set up on behalf of the Department of New Media, which is showing some excellent student work, and we're looking for people who are interested in working in various kind of creative digital industries to stop by, especially if you're interested in applying to the program, to speak with our recruiter, Nicole Hambroth. James and I will be there after the panel to take any questions, so please make sure to stop by and say hello and introduce yourselves. But that's obviously not the reason that you're here. You're here to see two fantastically, extraordinarily talented people. You're here to see, first of all, David Tremont, senior model maker at Weta. Here's the man. You're also here to see the co-founder, co-director of Weta Company, who's also, by the way, a five-time Oscar winner, who's also the designer and effects supervisor for Weta Workshops, and is the co-owner of Pukeko Pictures. This is, of course, Richard Taylor, who's also here with us this afternoon. Ladies and gents, I'd like to turn things over now to these two extraordinarily gifted and talented individuals, and hope you all have a good time.
Well, thank you very much, everyone. It's a treat to be here. I'm spending 48 hours in Canada, which is too short, of course. I actually made a television show with a company in Canada over 7 years, a company called Nelvana, and sadly never actually managed to get up here to enjoy the making of Jane and the Dragon. But it's such a treat to be here now with you. Because this is the first time that we have ever talked to a Canadian audience, we've put together a slideshow that I thought would be nice to show you a little bit about the back history of our company, and then we'll lead into a little talk I've put together about the designing of the dwarves. This is my wife and I. We started in the back room of our flat. We actually met when we were 13 and agreed at 15 that one day we'd spend our futures making cool things for a living. I didn't even know that the film industry existed at that stage, but we got going, and 5 years in we had the good fortune of meeting Peter Jackson, and he got us to work on a second movie, Meet the Feebles, and then his third movie, Brain Dead. And the bloodiest movie ever made at the time, and we held the proud record for slaughtering more zombies and spraying more blood than any movie before it. Then on to Heavenly Creatures, which saw us build the Borovnians. I'd made the beginning of my career sculpting margarine sculptures for buffets around restaurants around Wellington. And the first 300 commercial sculptures I ever did in the film industry were in margarine, and the Heavenly Creatures characters were all similarly sculpted in margarine, really only because I actually didn't know of any other material at the time, because the film industry was fairly young in New Zealand. On to The Frighteners with Michael J. Fox, which was our first big Hollywood opportunity. Running in parallel with these movies were Hercules and Xena for 7 years. And then, of course, on to The Lord of the Rings. Yay! We had the incredible opportunity of working for 7.5 years on these 3 movies. Obviously a much loved piece of literature for all of us, including everyone in the room. So getting an opportunity to do design, armor, weapons, creatures, miniatures, prosthetics, and special makeup effects was beyond our wildest imaginings. My assistant Rhea is rattling through these images really quick. So then since then on to any number of other films. We've worked on The Last Samurai, The Chronicles of Narnia. We couldn't imagine when we finished Lord of the Rings that we'd get to relive another piece of great British literature. So when Andrew Adamson invited me to fly up to LA to visit a little coffee shop in Hollywood and chat about his next film after Shrek, and it happened to be his desire to make C.S. Lewis's much-loved stories into feature films, I just about fell off my chair, as you could imagine. And we spent the next 5 years in the world of Narnia, which was a truly amazing experience. Then on to King Kong, and we spent many years developing the look of Skull Island, the indigenous people, the great creatures that lived on the island, building the massive miniatures that we used to capture the film. And then on to a number of other films, including Master and Commander, where we built the square rigger ships at a massive scale. After we finished on Lord of the Rings, someone said to me at the workshop, after finishing these films, who on earth could you possibly imagine working with? And I said, oh, of any director in the world I'd now love to work with, it would be Peter Weir. Jump forward only 3 weeks, and the phone rings, and Peter Weir cold calls and asks us to work on Master and Commander. We did the train crash sequence out of the second Zorro movie, which for me is a joy, because I'm a huge miniature railway enthusiast, and very keen to blow things up. So putting those 2 things together is an absolute delight. And then 30 Days of Nights, Daybreakers, a great Kiwi movie called Black Sheep. If you haven't seen it, hey, good on you. When 30 million sheep go mad. Peter Pan, Hellboy. I can't even see what that other one up in the corner is there. Oh, thank you. And then on to Tintin. We used to have this long-running joke in the workshop. It very quickly became very stale, but we used to have only one phone in the building, and when it would ring, whoever was nearest to it would answer it and yell out for me to go and answer it. And of course, the running joke was, Richard, it's Stephen for you. And it's like, yeah, of course. And because we all dreamed of one day working with the likes of Steven Spielberg. Well, one day the phone rang and it was Stephen for us. And he invited us to make Tintin, and that was an amazing experience. Like yourselves possibly being in a country with French influence, in New Zealand we grew up as being part of the Commonwealth. The books of Ergay made it to New Zealand, and if you did French in New Zealand as a study, as I did, then you were taught through the writings of Ergay, and so it meant a great deal to us to work on these books. We also had the chance to work on Halo until it sadly fell over as a feature film. But in the interim, we got to also have the opportunity to work on some short movies that ended up on the internet that some of you may have seen. And one of the cool things that we got to build was the Warthog. And those of you that have driven the Warthog in the game know what an insanely crazy vehicle it is. Well, I promise you, driving the real thing at 100 kilometers an hour sideways is equally as crazy. So we built this thing in 6 weeks. That was the deadline. We didn't want to do it in 6 weeks. We wanted a hell of a lot longer, but we were offered the opportunity to do these 4 internet movies if we could build it in the deadline. And this is often the challenge, that the client offers you the job if you can meet the deadline. And in this case, we built the armor, the guns, the creatures, and this vehicle in that period of time. The vehicle can go 100 kilometers an hour in the mud. It's got crabbing ability and four-wheel steering ability. So when you hop in it, it's really cool. And needless to say, we used it an awful lot before it actually made it to the screen. And a pile of other stuff that was built. Then on to Avatar with James Cameron. And you can imagine the visionary experience that this was. James invited us to look after a big chunk of the design, building the props, the military costumes, military hardware, and all of the Na'vi culture and all of their clothing and jewelry, their artifacts, their weapons. Even though the Na'vi were completely digital, James is so focused on trying to create a completely plausible world that he had us build everything at one-to-one scale that we then delivered to Weta Digital, and they copied it for their reference. And you can flick to the next slide, Ree. We got to build an amazing array of stuff, including all of the link units, which are those bizarre beds that they lie in to connect with their Na'vi, with their avatars. The units that carry the avatars across the universe, all the military hardware, the guns, and it was truly an amazing experience. In the workshop, we have a number of departments. Firstly, of course, it all starts with design, and we've got the great fortune of having an amazing group of incredible artists. All of them have joined us at various times, mainly starting as very young people in the workshop, worked their way up. Many of them have made the transition from practical illustration, traditional illustration, to digital illustration and modeling. We now use extensive use of ZBrush, and anyone that is a sculptor in the room that's hoping to make a career, I strongly recommend that you start looking at ZBrush as a complement to your physical sculpting abilities, because it gives you another tool that will accelerate your ability to deliver commercial services to your client. We have also a armor making department, and this is probably our most comprehensive department. On Lord of the Rings, as is now often reported, we made chainmail where we hand assembled 12.5 million links of chain over those years. When the movie came to an end, I made a decision to set up a commercial chainmail making company out of China with our partner there. And we've now made chainmail for a number of movies, and I think that's Robin Hood and Kingdom of Heaven on the screen there, amongst as well as Lord of the Rings. And if you go to the next slide, our armor smithing starts all through good design, but then it goes to the blacksmithing shops where we hand beat the steel armor, and that's Stu in the top left-hand corner, who was one of our great armor smiths on Lord of the Rings. Or we 3D model it and we mill it on the milling machines. We've custom built 6 3-axis, 4-axis and 5-axis milling machines in the workshop, and these machines can work tirelessly 24 hours a day to mill out the masters from which we take our replica castings. All of it, of course, has to fit the actors perfectly. Weapons making, and that's Peter Lyon, and at the talk I gave yesterday, I mentioned that Peter's the only living sword maker who has his swords now in the Queen's collection at the Leeds Armoury in England. So great are his swords. He was a computer programmer at the local bank making swords in his hobby time for the reenactment trade around New Zealand, and joined us on Lord of the Rings. He's been with us 14 years now, and he has made all of the hero swords at Weta, such as his exceptional ability and focus to detail. And then we have, next slide, miniatures, of course, and we coined the phrase bigatures because some of the miniatures would easily fill this room. People think of miniatures as tabletop scale, but very, very few miniatures would fit on this stage. Most of them would encompass most of the space in this room, or if, in some cases, considerably larger. We'll jump to the next slide. And there's David Tremont, who's my friend over here. And David is our senior model maker. He looks after all of our collectibles model making. And he built a number of the miniatures on Lord of the Rings, including this, which is Barad-dûr. And Barad-dûr would not fit in this room, such as the significance of its size. You always try and build a miniature to the largest scale possible. We're sitting in a 1-to-1 scale room, so that means that everything is built at the same scale as us. Barad-dûr, and if you remember it in the movie, the camera passes within 3 millimeters of its surface, but Barad-dûr was built at 166 scale. So it's 166 times smaller than real life. So a door is only a millimeter tall. So that's an imperative that the detail on the surface of that miniature is so hyper accurate and so absolutely exacting, so that when you see it in the lens of the camera and ultimately on film, it looks photorealistic. And of course, that's a tribute to David's dedication. David actually has gone on and made a collectible. David's made a collectible at 1/600th scale.
Yeah, it was actually 12.66 of that, because it had to be 500 mil tall. So
Okay, 12.66 times smaller than the 166 scale miniature to the 1-to-1 scale. And the miniature over at the Weta stand took more hours than it took to build that miniature, because so exacting is it when you build it that small. David ultimately spent 1,200 hours hand carving the collectible at our stand to match that collectible, that miniature, so it would complement your guys' desires to see the exact replicas from the movie. The next slide, we have a big prosthetic makeup department, and you can jump to the next slide. And the makeup department, we work in foam latex, gelatin, and silicon. The new technologies of 48 frame, high def, 6K, 3D has pushed our technology even further. We're now using acrylic encapsulated silicon gel prosthetics impregnated with flocking to exactly replicate the corpuscle count of the actor's face. Because just like the digital golem, when light passes through the surface and subsurface scatters through the skin of the creature, it's imperative that the translucency is replicated exactly between the prosthetic and the actor's skin. And to do that, we have to work through a complex process of making sure that we get the translucency, the color, and even the shore hardness. We change the shore hardness of the prosthetics 4 times a year, depending on the temperature changes in the Wellington landscape, so that the flexibility of the prosthetic exactly matches the flexibility of the actor's face. A corker of a challenge. None of it possible, of course, without the amazing talent of the self-trained people on our crew. If you just flick to the next slide. And then we do weapons. This is an interesting weapon that Gareth is holding here. Gareth used to be our workshop supervisor and has since gone on to become an educator. He felt a real need to move on to a university and take what he had learned. But this gun we developed for Avatar, and this is a reciprocating gun, something that you may not think about, some of you possibly have. Every time a gun is fired on set, an automatic machine gun, a $2 coin falls out at the end of it every 1/7 of a second. So if an automatic machine gun fires 7 times a second, every blank shell costs $2 a shell. So every second, $14 falls out the end of the gun. Of course, the armourer that's managing the gun has also been paid for. So by the end of the day, one gun may shoot $60,000 worth of rounds. We decided we'd try and come up with some way to combat this. Another big challenge, of course, is also everyone on set has to wear earmuffs because it's so bloody noisy. And therefore, we came up with a reciprocating gun. When you pull the trigger, it reciprocates 7 times a second, shaking the body fat on your body exactly like a machine gun would, while firing shells out of the breech and also firing a high-powered LED display out of the end of the barrel, illuminating the actor's face and the environment around the actor. Then we still have to digitally composite the flame at the end of the barrel, but when you film at 24 frames a second, 1 in every 7 flashes out of the end of the barrel is not registered anyway on film, so you still have to paint back in the digital muzzle flash, even if you're using a proper gun. So this has proved to be a very cost-effective and almost silent opportunity for filmmakers. We have a very significant 3D department within the workshop, and that touches on all array of things: digital scanning, 3D printing, model making. Sorry to be rushing so fast, we've got so little time. We do some pretty wacky jobs, from building full-size aeroplanes. We build full-size working tanks. About a third of everything that we do every year is for unusual collectors around the world that just want cool stuff. The bottom picture is for a woman that approached us who was a double amputee, but she wanted to be a mermaid. So we built a buoyancy neutral, fully articulated mermaid tail that allows her to swim through the ocean with a grace and beauty equivalent to a mermaid. Just go back one, Reed. That dragon thing at the top, an Australian nightclub owner decided that it would be really cool if, when dancers were dancing in his nightclub, sometime through the night, there would be a huge crash up in the roof, and one of these disco frames that these lights are hanging on would collapse out of the roof, waking up this dragon who would be hanging on it. The dragon would stand up, spread its wings, look around the room, spot a dancer, fire its laser lights out of its eyes, all controlled by the DJ remotely from the DJ booth, track the poor dancer around the floor till the dancer finally freezes, at which point the creature would blow CO2 fire all over the dancer and then go back to sleep and go back into the roof. So, so with a brief like that, how could you say no, eh? So, for the last 14 years, I'm a huge collector of garage kits, as many people in the room I'm sure are. I have over 250 of them. I've been making them since I was a teenager, buying them over snail mail originally, but of course now the internet makes it possible to find almost anything. And that instigated my desire to start our collectibles line on Lord of the Rings, and that has now grown to encompass a number of different brands, including our own IP, Dr. Grawbort's. And this is our sculpting of the collectibles. And also we do large-scale public art sculpture, which is the next slide. And for the premieres of Lord of the Rings, we've done a number of very large sculptures, including fell beasts and cave trolls. We did a tribute sculpture for the Rugby World Cup. We've done a sculpture celebrating the New Zealand film industry, and that's that huge tripod in the top corner. And most recently, we've done a massive golem for our local airport, which was fantastic. And having to go in the middle of the night and install that before everyone got up in the morning was quite a challenge, as you can imagine. So the idea is he's popping through the lake surface to try and grab a fish for breakfast. This is our partner in China, and this is the gentleman, Fred, that we do all of our bronze casting with. We have a massive foundry in China where we do public artworks, and that's a World of Warcraft creature that we did for Blizzard that's now in Irvine in California. And a few years ago, having felt guilty about all the buses that come and park outside our workshop, we decided to open the Weta cave. And even though we only live in a little city, there's only 250,000 people in the city we live in, we get over 100,000 visitors a year through the Weta cave. And the Weta cave stuck out in the middle of a tiny little suburb where we have our factory. And people come from all over the world to visit this little shop and gallery. And that's been a real joy because it's given us the chance to meet some amazing people. And then we also have a children's television production company, which my wife and I fulfilled a lifelong dream. We were collecting children's television from all over the world, especially stop animation television, specifically from British companies like Cosgrove Hall, McKinnon and Saunders, Aardman and others. And that instigated us to start our own television company 12 years ago, making Jane and the Dragon, and now we make the What-Wats, which sells in 105 countries, which is really cool. People have said from the giddy heights of Lord of the Rings, why would you waste your time making something like the What-Wats? But to us, I very much see that we owe it to the children's entertainment arena, that the skills we have learnt through our filmmaking, we should in turn be sharing in things like educational television. Now on to The Hobbit, and the subject I thought would be nice to touch on was the dwarves, because it's much discussed. So the challenge of the dwarves, as you can see here, it's very easy to design a bunch of 13 dwarves, but how on earth you actually can tell them apart, and how critical you tell your Balins from your Dwalins. And of course, first and foremost, that comes down to, flick to the next slide, iconic silhouette, or iconic design and silhouette. If you remember on Lord of the Rings, we made a great deal of effort to try and make sure that although we had 4 hobbits, arguably all looking pretty much the same, 2 humans looking pretty much the same, and 3 others, it was imperative that even in a silhouette, even in a shot half a mile up from a helicopter, you would instantaneously be able to recognize their iconic silhouette. This is at the very core of pop culture. Peter even calls it toy-centric recognition. When a young child reaches into the toy box where there may be 100 action figures, how does that child know to specifically find and identify their one iconic pop culture toy that they love? And it comes down to the imperative around the design of iconic silhouette. And with the dwarves, that's where we start. It's all about trying to create a signature design that iconically represents that individual independently to all the other individuals associated with them in the shot. So we start with a massive round of design, as you could imagine, and we start sampling ideas, we start pushing around things. We ultimately often start with the most traditional ideas and then start going to either ends of the scale. And one of the things that we'll do is we'll take photographs of our own staff and we'll start to do digital modeling on them, where we'll try Photoshop exercises, and then we'll swap into makeup exercises where we actually cast the faces of our own staff within the workshop, sculpt prosthetics for them, and try different things. Start to try experimenting, as you can see there, with massive noses, large ears, and playing around with the characters. One of the great challenges with the dwarves is that you're trying to turn someone of my height into someone that looks like they're only 4'8". A person that is of short in stature invariably has a larger head to body ratio than someone of my height. So I have about an 8-to-1 head to body ratio, where a dwarf has a 5-to-1 head to body ratio. So we have to try and truncate the torso, thicken up the limbs, increase the hands and the feet in scale, widen the head, and generally bulk out the body, which is a very difficult challenge when you're working on someone like Graham McTavish, who is a slim, powerful build, over 6 foot tall. Okay, if we can go to the next slide. This is Kim. Kim runs all of our prosthetics at the height of production, and consistently for 2 years we had to run a minimum of 36 acrylic encapsulated silicon gel prosthetics every day to service the 13 dwarves on set. Because of course it's not 13 dwarves, it's 13 dwarves, their scale doubles, their picture doubles, their stunt doubles, and a number of other requirements that may come along, riding doubles for instance. So there's a significant amount of work. Appreciating that prosthetics can only be used once a day and the edges are damaged, so they're thrown away. We spent 1/10 of our total budget on silicon. It's one of the most expensive materials used in the industry, and you have to throw it away at the end of every day. Very grim. Gloim was the first character we tackled. It was natural that we should tackle Gloim first with Peter Hambleton because of the relationship to Gimli. John Rhys Davies had played Gimli, and this is his dad, and we wanted to make sure that we got a family lineage through the two characters. On to Dory, and this wonderful New Zealand actor. You can see that not only are we trying to find iconic recognition in the faces, but also in the hair. And what's interesting in this set of slides is in the bottom there is that grey image of the sculpture and plasticine. Every single dwarf, and quite frequently every character that we actually design, will sculpt the hair as a physical sculpture, because you're not worried about the fact that you don't have hair, you're worried about the fact you're trying to communicate the form that the hair will take once the wig and beards are made. Dwalin was particularly a challenging character because of his history that Tolkien writes about, and the fact that he has to look like an old bruiser. He's been through battles, an ear torn off, badly scarred face. But Richard Armitage was truly one of the most wonderful, gentlemanly characters to work with. And if you ever get a chance to go to a convention where he's talking, or you get to meet him, it will be a treat, I promise you. On to Balin and Oin. And you can see once again trying to find iconic recognition in the characters. Bomba. Poor old Stephen had the maximum amount of prosthetics required every day. Stephen's not a small bloke, but we visualize Bomba as a massive human, as a massive scale dwarf worn by a human being. So poor old Bomba, poor old Stephen had to wear a huge fat suit, the largest limbs, the biggest feet, and the most significant amount of prosthetics every day. Biffa, Peter, at some point in the process, remember we only got the actors 7 weeks out from the first day of shoot, so all of this work that you're seeing here, which is a vast quantity of work, huge amount of R&D, huge amount of design process is happening over that 7-week period, galloping towards the first day of shoot. What we do is we put up on the wall these A4 booklets that have the countdown numbers to the first day of shoot, and then countdown numbers to deadlines. And our production staff every day go and tear off the pages. There's 20 days out. Suddenly you've only got 10 days out. Suddenly there's only 3 days out. And it accelerates and accelerates towards the deadline. People are now living under their desks. They're sleeping in the workshop. We're galloping towards these deadlines to try and fulfill the expectation of the job. Thorin was the single most difficult character to get. Richard's got a magnificent face already, but the producers, the director, very much visualized Thorin's face as being regal, refined, and dignified. And we ultimately sculpted Thorin 6 times, making 6 sets of prosthetics before finally getting what was required. And we actually shot for a few days with different prosthetics in the movie before we actually finally achieved the results that we were pursuing. Killy and Philly, the two handsome dudes in this on screen, and with these guys we discovered that less was more. We tried any number of ideas until we ultimately settled on very, very small amounts of prosthetics to give them the qualities that were required. Ori was one of the most delightful characters that we got to work on, trying to create a very innocent, youthful dwarf that's yet to experience the world. Little facial hair, the bowl cut hairdo, little braids that his mummy has woven into his hair, made no end of fun. You can see the problem here. There's so many bloody dwarves, even talking to you about them. Nori, we've got to Nori. Jed Brophy is one of our dearest friends. Jed has acted in every movie that we've worked on in New Zealand with Peter Jackson. I think Jed had anywhere from 7 to 14 roles in Lord of the Rings. He is a tireless, energized performer, actor in New Zealand, and it was so incredible for the whole of the industry and for us when we saw that Jed was cast as one of the leads for the dwarves of The Hobbit, and he more than fulfilled the role. And you can see how extreme we've gone there with his hair to capture an iconic idea. Onto Bofa and trying to keep the twinkle in his eye and his iconic hat. And it was very cool. I saw a young woman today wearing a Bofa hat. So it was so lovely to know that that's got out there. Nearly done. Thror, the king of the dwarves. And you can see there working very hard to try and create a unique, memorable character that doesn't fall into cliche, that will be iconic, remembered, and beautiful going forward. A lot of departments here. Peter King working on the hair, us doing the makeup, the costume department with Bob Buck and Am Maskry working on the costume elements. Everyone chipping in and coming together to try and make it work. And then Thrain with his missing eye, his tattooed face, and his very scarred demeanour. And the last thing, the dwarf women. And in this case, we turn to our staff once again to give them a lovely haired appearance. And third image in at the top there is my assistant, sporting quite a nice little a sprouting of beard here. And of course, the trick here is to not make it farcical, not make it laughable, make it look beautiful, exactly as Tolkien imagined it. He never wrote these characters as they do comical things. They're comical in their demeanor and they're comical in their actions at times because they're loving life, but they're not comical characters. And it was imperative when we bearded the dwarf women that they come over as beautiful, dignified, regal characters in this amazing realm. And that's a crash course in designing dwarves on The Hobbit. One small area of the vast amount of stuff that we got to do over the last 4.5 years. You can appreciate an incredible joy for all of us to do this sort of work as a career. And I know that many people in the room, some of you that I've met already this weekend, are also either building careers, pursuing, or living in this industry. And I feel very, very fortunate. I come to work every morning knowing that I've been blessed by what I get to do for a career. And I, in turn, appreciate that some of you that are pursuing this for a life career yourselves will experience the same thing. So we'll throw the floor open to questions after that, and I'll have a quick swig of my orange juice. Phew.
So, are there questions? Yes, over in the center.
You can just bellow it out
Yeah.
if you like. So.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi, sir.
Working that you guys work on with the prosthetics and the props and touching the armor and the clothing and that, seeing you come onto the stage with the lovely staff, are there always things that you find working on a movie that, oh, one of those when I go home? Or is it more like, oh, I can't believe I've worked so much on that I never want to see it again?
Yeah, well, our house has nothing in it that would suggest what we do for a living because I've got 2 young children. My wife and I work in the workshop together. We live it and breathe it. So when we get home, we're trying to not raise the kids in an environment of wacky fantasy that we live in. I know, you may wonder why not, but when they come to the workshop, they're so absorbed in it that we're trying to keep some level of stability at home that isn't off on some, crazy planet and some crazy dream that their mum and dad are having every day. So I think it's working okay at the moment. Maybe it will start to creep in as they become teenagers. But my 11-year-old has just bought an amplifier for his electric guitar, so woohoo! What a lucky dad.
I'm similar. I don't have much at home, but I come to work every day and surrounded by it. We work in a workshop that is a museum, And it's wonderful seeing that stuff all the time up on the walls. Oops. Yeah, we do love it. We do love being next to it all the time. We don't hate it anymore. It's always just part of the magic.
There's no great sense in our business model because every time we finish something, we spend the profit building a replica of the thing we've just built so it can go on the wall.
And a new wall to put it on.
Yeah, and then you've got to build the wall. I'm sure that there's no better group than the people in this room to appreciate. I'm sure you would do exactly the same. You're only here because you love this stuff. So,
Another question?
Hey, I just wanted to say that I love the movie. It was amazing.
Thank you.
With the new release of the MakerBot and the new CopyBot that they're doing, you said a big thing of the industry was the turnaround and meeting deadlines. Have you seen that in your field have a dramatic change on how fast you guys put out prosthetics or put out little models, the miniatures?
yeah, it's critical. We couldn't actually be commercially viable if we hadn't stayed up with technology. It's frightening that that's a reality now. On Lord of the Rings, we hand-carved every detail into wax. We then made stamps. We physically stamped them by hand into leather. Today, we have to use laser cutting. We have to 3D print. We have to mill. We've got 3 home-built 3D printers in the workshop, 1 commercial 3D printer, 2 laser cutters, and 6 3D milling machines. All of them run 24 hours a day. All of them do the work of 8 people, each machine, because it's not because we want to turn to digital technology. It's because the deadlines have become more and more ferocious. The luxuries of having pre-production time to build things have gone. And as the investor wants a quicker return on their money, as they want to get the movie to the market faster, we all have to compete with that process and make sure that we stay relevant in the industry. That can be serviced through technology. And it's a very, very valid question that you've asked. And many of you will find as you're building your businesses or you've already built them that you're having to turn to this sort of technology. And 3D printers will become so common in our lives. They'll be as common as our inkjet printer printing letters next to our computers. It's an incredibly exciting time, not just for model makers, but as just an everyday consumer where you're going to be able to 3D print a replica of your children as easily as you would have one day 2D printed a photograph of your family. So, cool. Next question.
Thanks, Riley.
My question is sort of related to that previous question, but I noticed that in The Lord of the Rings there were more prosthetic orcs, whereas in The Hobbit there were more CG orcs. So I was just kind of wondering maybe why you turned that direction.
Yeah, I answered this question yesterday very, very quickly. We've started to run out of options. As I described yesterday, one of the great challenges of the human body as a vehicle for prosthetics is you're tied to the triangles of the groin to the underarms, the mouth to the eyes. We came up with some wildly creative orcs for The Hobbit, as we did for Lord of the Rings, but there was a need to find even more unique characters. And the only way that we could digitally or augment the human face was to spread the eyes and spread the distance from the eyes to the mouth, spread the width of the chest and the length of the torso. You can do it through costuming, but it restricts the actor's performance. So in an effort to try and give an audience an even more unique take of the creatures within Middle-earth, we turned to digital technology to find that solution. Sorry to rush the answer, but we're running out of time. Next question? Yes.
Considering how large Weta has become as an organization, considering its roots, do you consider yourself more of an artist these days or more of an administrator? And do you find that balance satisfying or frustrating?
Now that's a fantastic question, because it's one I ponder every day. I am an artist first and foremost, and therefore I have given up what I love doing to do what I do, but the satisfaction out of administrating other artists to do what they love doing at this point in my life is so fulfilling that I'm willing to give up my own aspirations as a sculptor. but I never enter the workshop by the office. I only enter by the workshop floor. I'm very disciplined on myself in that I will spend 8 of every 10 hours a day that we work in the workshop on the workshop floor with our team, interacting, sculpting, model making alongside them, much to the frustration of my assistant, because of course it means that the massive amount of business that it takes to run an operation like ours, as you saw we run 5 separate businesses, has to fall into the evening. The only way that's possible is because my wife and I run the company together, so we socialise around the management of the business, which happens at night time. And but that allows me the freedom of being in the workshop doing what I love doing. And it's a real challenge for anyone in the room that's expanding their business, how on earth you keep the very inspiration that got you into the business in the first place without becoming overwhelmed by the emails and paperwork that becomes the core of any growth of any business. But thankfully at this point we're hanging on for dear life.
So I'm afraid we've run out of time pretty much there. Just one last comment here for Richard and David. One of the things that amazes me when I meet people like Richard and David is just how grounded they are. They came up, and when you talk to them, they started off just as kids putting things together in sheds, or as Richard's father said, he's a sheddy. Yeah, he just goes in his shed and does stuff and works on things. And these guys are completely committed to what they do. They love what they do, and it really comes through because they have a sense of fantasy, and I think they share a bond, an inherent bond with this audience, is that you love what you do, and you do it because you love it.
Thank you. Hopefully one of the things you'll appreciate by what I've said in my talk, what I try and do in talking to the young people in a room like this, is to try and demystify what we do. It is not magic. It is not inaccessible. I started with no skills and no knowledge, and as did David, no formal training at any level, no mentor, no inspiration that was directly given to us, no leadership, no tertiary education, no course, no books, no magazines, no videos. Just gave it a go. As so many of you in the room have done yourselves, you just bought some stuff and gave it a go. And that is the magic. There is no silver bullet, there's no clever mechanism, there's no tertiary education that's going to turn it on for you. If you don't have it in you, it's not going to come out of you. And you know, digital technology, it's hardware, not hardware. It's irrelevant of the equipment. It's only what's in you. And anything is possible should you be inspired, passionate, enthusiastic, driven to give it a go. And it's so lovely having interacted with so many people over the last 2 days that have come up to us, and it's uncanny how similar as Canadians and Kiwis we are. The stories I've heard could be straight out of our lives. So thank you.
Thanks. Well, a remarkable experience today, and thank you so much for sharing everything with us. It was remarkable. Please come back.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
For those of you leaving, if you can exit the doors out the back.
We'll be at the stand all afternoon.
If you have a VIP pass